Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, May 7th, 2018. We do have a very full agenda. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to recognize this meeting is taking place on the traditional and unceded territory of the Staminas First Nation. And with that, we will call the item to order, or the meeting to order. The first item on our open agenda is the agenda approval. Are there any changes or additions? Councillor Arnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Just it is a full agenda, but it'll be a quick one. In the new business, sports, tourism, and Mini World Cup Council, and congratulations to the organizers. Thanks.
Under new business? Okay, Councillor Patterson?
Ladysmith ambassadors and placemakers.
Under new business?
Yeah.
So those are two different items.
Yeah.
Any other changes or late additions to a long agenda? Seeing none, I was just going to say we will be deleting delegations 5.1 and 5.2. They had to reschedule. So with those changes, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Arnett, seconded by Councillor Patterson. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Items to rise with the report. No, none.
Do you want me to speak to
There was just the one, I think.
this
But
agenda item? It would be agenda item 4.1 at this time.
thank you.
The study to
Extend the services.
extend the
to
services
South
to
Ladysmith.
South Ladysmith.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes, item 4.1, meeting minutes of the regular meeting from April 9th, 2018, pages 1 through 8, moved by Councillor Arnett. Seconded by Councillor Friesenhan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. 4.2, minutes of the public hearing and regular meeting of council from April 16th, pages 6 to 17 in the package. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Fraden. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to delegations, 5.3, Bill Eller and Associates, Holland Creek Bridge Crossing. And by the glow on the top of my head, I presume there's a presentation beside me. Would you like to hold questions to the end or interrupt as we go?
I think it's either way. I'm open to questions as we move along.
I wonder if council has a preference, maybe if we can, because we do have a full agenda, maybe just try and save any questions till the end. Thank you. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Just gonna give you. Okay. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bill Eller, and I own the development lands on the opposite side of Holland Creek from Colonia Drive. I can get closer. That's fine. That better? Okay, so I have 43 acres of development land in the Holland Creek local area plan. From the Colonia Drive side, there are 3 development partners, and council has already dealt with the Jim Dickinson Chemainus First Nation co-venture development from Dogwood Road, and the 3 developing partners will eventually connect between Dogwood Drive and Colonia Drive as the build-out progresses in the Holland Creek local area plan. And all of this has been on the OCP for probably 20 years, possibly longer. So just so everyone understands, I have a conditional subdivision approval for my first 38 of predicted 200 lots on the other side of Holland Creek from Colonia Drive. And I have the necessary easements to make the crossing through the Holland Creek area. And I am here to request construction approval for the Holland Creek Bridge Culvert crossing for this construction season. McElhaney Engineering has been working with me for the last several years. First of all, we went through a considerable period of doing the precursor engineering work for the development cost charge environment for Holland Creek. That's coming up. And then conducting the engineering for crossing Holland Creek to get to the development lands on the other side. So we'll go through the, tonight I have a representative of McElhaney Engineering and a representative from Corvide Environmental, who would be my environmental protection contractor for the undertaking of this project, which also includes Ryzik Geotechnical for the geotechnical components. And I think that's it. So the crossing, and we have some photos to go along with this as well when we get through the construction drawings here. What the construction drawings show, so this is just the general arrangement. You can see that the creek's in the middle and the top half of that diagram. The box sort of right in the middle of that diagram is the bridge culvert, and the two boxes on either side of that are pedestrian underpasses to accommodate trail visitors in Holland Creek Trail Park. Now, the clicker, am I using it right? The forward button? Let's. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, so there again you can see that the bridge culvert, and we have different perspectives of this. This is from the plan view. For the most part, this particular picture is intended to show the impact of the footprint the structure will occupy through the crossing area. There it is again. It shows the where the blue area there is, that's the Q200 wetted perimeter flow of Holland Creek. It shows the bridge culvert above that in an arch form. And there's two pedestrian passes on either side. The one on the left-hand side will accommodate infrastructure and pedestrian traffic, wheelchair access level. And then the pedestrian underpass on the other side of Holland Creek will accommodate able hikers through that side. Oh, is there? Oh, right in the front? Okay, thank you. So, one thing, I don't know if I'm using it right. Is that the one right in the tip there? Okay, you're so good. I should have you do this. Okay, you're going to see these green areas here are the approach sidewalls of the fill area. You can tell I'm a little bit nervous, huh? These are what are called mechanically stabilized earth walls, and they will be vegetated. So when this structure is complete, other than the structures itself, the outer walls on both sides will be vegetated so that they will have a green appearance. If when you're looking at it from upstream, looking down, or vice versa, it will have a green appearance. They'll be relatively steep. The downstream side is slated for 70 degrees. The upstream side is slated for potentially vertical or perhaps 80 degrees. But the most important feature of it will be once it takes its vegetation, it will become part of the green landscape. So that's probably the primary reason that we're advocating this particular structure type. We believe this will have the least possible impact on the Holland Creek trail visitor experience. Oh, I don't know. Next one, please. So that, in that picture, we're looking from the top. In the next picture, we're looking through the end. Guillermo? Could you? Okay.
You have more after this? Seems like that's all.
Well, is that?
That's the last one with the red, with the box.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Doc. I can try go back one. Oh,
Next one.
there one. Oh. Okay. So that's a little peculiar. That what that shows is that shows the water column underneath the structure, as if it was just cut right down the center of the structure, the main bridge culvert structure. So that we're seeing the water column on the bottom. We're seeing the foundation footings for the bridge culvert. We've got fill above that, and then we've got our fundamental road structures above that, including the no post protection to keep vehicles from going off the road. So that maybe we've got a couple of pictures to look at. Do you have them on your drive?
They're on the drive as well, not the PDF file. There were a few other files attached.
Okay. The point to mention here is that at the end of Colonia Drive now, on the right-hand side, just as you're coming down Colonia Drive to where it ends, there is a mechanically stabilized earth wall there that was built by the developer of the subdivision at the end of Colonia, which provides a tremendous illustration of what a vegetated, mechanically stabilized earth wall looks like. So that, again, it becomes part of the environment as opposed to being a concrete structure which tends to attract graffiti and that sort of thing. So, like I say, my goal here is to achieve construction approval for this season. My goal at the moment, and I've discussed this at length with Jeff and Felicity, is my principal goal is getting from the end of Colonia to the development property. So at this particular time, I know that I can achieve all the conditional requirements for the development on the other side. It's just a matter of being able to construct the crossing from Colonia Drive to the development lands on the other side. And given the fact that we're into May already, construction season is coming upon us very soon, and that's why I'm here seeking construction approval. So, to save time, I'd be more than happy to invite questions of my environmental protection consultant, or my engineering consultant, or myself on this.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. I'll get a speakers list together, but I think that I think most of my questions would be for staff. To have something like this come forward, we've seen no staff report. Would staff be contemplating coming back to council with a report detailing some of the, we're talking about this construction season, which to me has already begun. I'd like to hear from staff on what the process moving forward is from council's perspective.
So, Your Worship, yes, you're correct. At this point, all you can do is receive the delegation and maybe ask questions about the project, but we will take all this information and we'll report back to council.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will take hands. I saw Councillor Patterson and Councillor Hutchins. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of one comment is I'm not a very technical person, so I would really like to see pictures or a drawing of what the bridge will look like when both when you're in a vehicle or walking on it, and then if you're using the trail. Because that would be important to me,
Yeah,
because it is a
just-
very,
So, quick question, do you have any actual renderings, or just these engineering drawings?
We don't have any specific renderings for this particular project.
Oh, okay.
We do have probably a variety of
Example pictures?
examples of similar projects, which I think would be useful. So that's all I can offer at this particular moment.
Okay.
yeah, no, that, and the other one is, you couldn't find a smaller one. The concrete roadside barrier pedestrian fence, is that just the standard, dividers that you see on the highway?
Yes, it is.
I was anticipating something a little bit more fitting in with the nature of the bridge crossing over the Holland Creek trails, etc. So, but when we see the pictures or samples, it might be okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hutchins?
Yeah, my question to Bill is, what is the construction window?
Construction low flow season, kind of
End of September.
May 15th to September 15th. And the closer to the middle of that as you can get is the better for the actual creek crossing itself. There's a lot of precursor work to get to that point. We do have access to both sides of the creek. The corridor will have to be cleared. I would entertain a phased process in which we would be given approval to clear the access corridor, and then proceed to perhaps what might be considered a second stage, which would be approval of the structure construction itself.
And what is the actual timeline for the construction of such a piece of?
Well, in talking to my builder, we're looking at construction June through August.
So it's a 3-month construction.
I think we can confine that to 8 weeks, but it'll be pretty intensive.
Thank you. There's no more questions. I have a motion.
Okay, when there is, okay, so we'll go through the questions, and Councillor Hutchins has got a motion. Councillor Henderson?
My question is, for how much of that construction period will the trail be closed?
Our plan is to provide pedestrian traffic management, to have the trail open for as many days as possible during that construction period. During periods of blasting, for instance, or falling, obviously certain portions of the trail would have to be cut off, but I don't see a circumstance where the trail would be closed for very many days out of the complete construction season. We intend to keep the trail open with what you might call detours around the construction zones to keep everyone safe.
And once it's completed, these culvert-like pedestrian areas, how long are they, first of all? And,
Ken, you have a number on that? 22 meters. So
so,
about roughly 70 feet.
so is there any lighting in there?
They will be lighted.
Lit.
They're lit. Like, okay.
She was a school teacher.
I stand.
Does it to us all
I
the
stand
time.
corrected, but they will be lit.
Yes.
Yes. The trail experience and personal safety was at the top of our agenda in determining that, both the size and the fact that they will be lit.
Thank you. Councillor Arnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Bill's already answered the first question, which was actually build-out time projected. In terms of the three partners, one of them is the owners, lot owners. One of them is Dominis, and has there been conversation about this proposed bridge over the creek with Dominis?
I'm sorry, with what's the name?
Dominis, the
Oh, the Jimenez First Nations.
Yeah.
Jimenez First Nations, together with Jim Dickinson and myself and the previous owners of the property in the middle, spent, I would say, 6 months in intensive engineering conversations with the town of Ladysmith for the formulation of the DCC program for Holland Creek. At that time, all three development owners agreed that the best way to accommodate this type of structure, because this is what is intended to be a DCC eligible project, intended that there are other DCC eligible projects throughout that area between Dogwood and Colonia, and at that time all development partners agreed on the framework for the DCCs for Holland Creek Local Area Plan.
So,
To my knowledge, that stands.
so Seminis would support the bridge over as the proposed type of bridge you're talking about over the creek.
Yeah, I see
Is that
where
what
you're
I'm hearing?
going, Councillor Arnett. The thing is that as co-development partners
Yeah.
with Jim Dickinson and having participated in that program, I would think that they would be logically in favor of a crossing at Holland Creek, since that was all part of the greater scheme of the Holland Creek Local Area Plan. Whether they look more specifically at a crossing or not, I don't see why they would pose an
saying-
objection.
You're saying there's a basis for
There's a basis
discussion.
for agreement.
Discussion, okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And then with respect to, you mentioned, I'm sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name that you brought. You referred to him as your environmental protection.
Yes,
guy.
Matt Johnson, Corvide Environmental.
Right. And so what discussion has gone on with the province Ministry of Environment around the proposed structure in terms of the type of structure?
I have filed for notification with the ministry as required for a project like this. They are just simply waiting for final drawings and for me to let them know who my environmental contractor is.
I see. And once that happens, what is the time frame for that in terms of them giving their blessing or not?
Once the Crown is satisfied that there is, and generally speaking, a credentialed engineering firm involved in the design of the structure itself and an environmental protection contractor that's an acknowledged environmental contractor in the province, it's almost overnight.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Councillor Henderson.
With this, sorry. When you're referring to the mechanically stabilized earth wall, is that the one that goes up onto that little, what do you call that?
There's a shared driveway there.
Yes. So that's normally built leaning into these more stable. So you describe a 90-degree one.
Yes.
What grows on a 90-degree wall other than English ivy, which is invasive?
Well, this is a conversation I'm having with my engineers. The plan would be to probably have it at 80 degrees, even though it's shown on the drawing as 90 degrees. And you can grow anything on a vertical wall as long as it has a substance to grow its roots into. So some of the mechanically stabilized earth walls I've seen actually have little cups on the outside. And those, as the structure is being built, you're using your construction material to fill in the middle, and you're using what you might call something more akin to organic topsoil on your outer fringe. And they have these little cups that capture water and allow vegetation to grow.
There's no way to get on the trail without being covered up into a tunnel? I mean, from an engineering point of view, to keep that trail open under the bridge?
Well, there's no way. The roadway would have to go on over top of a passenger walkway. There's the depiction of it there. And I mean, we've talked about at-grade crossings. Well, that doesn't work. In conversation with Felicity and Jeff, the one on the left, which is currently the one everyone would walk up to use the bridge, the little structure up where it crosses Holland Creek, and it's wheelchair accessible or motorized wheelchair accessible now. That's the only way to get them from let's say Mackay to the bridge would be through a pedestrian underpass.
Thank you.
And in part, just so that we're clear here, the gradient descending from Colonia Drive is at 12%, and the grade ascending to the development plateau is 12%. And in the middle we have what's called a K-curve, which is a transition curve, which is designed by engineers to accommodate the fact that people are coming down through a dip and transitioning to another rise. The geometric design for the project is for a 50-kilometer design that was instructed by staff. And all we could do to make it as low and as unimposing as we possibly could do was to put in a 40-kilometer K-curve transition with a flat profile, so it will not be super elevated, to get the structure as low and as unimposing as possible. So we think we've done our best to have the least possible impact here. But as far as trail users, you know, again, this has been in the OCP for over 20 years, and the only way you can engineer a roadway and accommodate trail users is through pedestrian underpasses.
Well,
Well,
or a much broader span that would take
okay,
the
well,
whole.
let's talk about broader spans. This particular structure, when it's complete, is expected to probably be about $2.5 million. The structure that was contemplated in the DCC project is $3.5 million, if I'm correct on that, Jeff. That's about right. So, and with the and we did that with the previous engineer, Herald Engineering, did that drawing for us. It was a bridge. It was 80 feet long, $3.5 million in today's dollars. And it still required a pedestrian underpass in that position for the wheelchair accessible trail. On the other side, it was undetermined where the pedestrians would be, but there was there's approximately a 4-meter elevation fill on the opposite side. And with a 4-meter elevation fill, we could put a crossing at grade, but it would be further up the hill from where the trail is now. And I would be happy to do that, because that means we reduce from 3 structures to 2. I believe, and I think staff believes, that this accommodating the pedestrians with pedestrian underpasses on both sides is the best solution for the trail experience, given the fact that there's going to be a road there. I mean, I can understand from a trail experience perspective that you wouldn't want a road there at all. But I have a subdivision, a conditional subdivision approval. I have a PLA. I've gone through the ringer with the town of Ladysmith. I'm in my 15th year now. And I need to move this project forward. And I'm trying to do my best to make everybody as happy as I can. So, in answer to your question about a longer span costs exponentially more money, in this case $2.5 to $3.5 million, and it still would not accommodate a pedestrian experience other than an underpass as shown on this drawing of some kind.
Thank you. Any other discussion from council at this time? Seeing none, through to Councillor Hutchins.
Bill, you outlined to us that there's a sense of urgency. Why are you delivering this to us on May 8th? Like, why wasn't this delivered in March? Or
I have been encouraging staff to move this forward. I have been communicating everything I've been doing with staff. And there has been no sense from my perspective that staff was advancing this project. And so I discussed it with Jeff. I said, look, Jeff, my preference, I said, this project needs to move forward. Either staff takes it to council or I take it to council in the form of a delegation. And so together we decided I would approach council in the form of a delegation.
Thank you. Our motion, if there's no more questions.
Yeah, so before we go to Councillor Hutchins for a motion, so when was this design completed and submitted then?
Just in the last week.
Oh, okay.
Because
So-
we've been working on a number of permutations to address the pedestrian experience, the trail user experience. And in conversation with Armtech, Structures, who is doing the structure engineering for the structures themselves in cooperation with McElhaney Engineering as the lead engineering firm.
Okay, thank you. And so I hear what you're saying too about, trying to keep the height down and minimize the bulk of the structure, and I do appreciate that. Everybody has an image when they think of what the crossing might look like in their minds. As you said, it's been on the books for a couple of decades, and I think that just like I saw with the way the waterfront plan evolves, it never really fits what your imagination imagines. So to any of us looking at this is, maybe I would expect it to be a departure from what people maybe imagine it would look like. And that's why I asked about pictures or renderings, because when you see something rendered from a POV where you can actually see what it would somewhat look like in context, it can provide assurances or at least an understanding for people of what this, a significant piece of infrastructure would actually look like. What are the facing, like when you look at these elevations here and even on the front page here, you've got the two pedestrian underpasses there. It looks like they're about 15 feet in diameter on each one. Just over 4.5 meters or so?
Yeah, they're 10 feet high in the center.
10 feet high in the center?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it said 4 meters and something. Okay, so 10 feet high in the center, maybe about 15 feet wide then if they're 4.5 meters wide.
Yeah, about that, yep.
What's this facing going to look like in your build out? Is this just concrete? So you're walking up the trail and you're going through this thing, this is just poured concrete, or is it faced?
The stream bottom will be in its natural form. There's an arch culvert. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think he's talking about
The walls.
side of the bridge,
So I understand out here on the edges, you said, you're going to plant them.
Oh,
right?
there will be a transition MSE right over top of the structure, so it will be a band of green from one side to the other, from looking upstream
okay.
and looking downstream.
Okay.
So again, to try and minimize the visual impact of the bridge from top or bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see the opening, and above the opening and surrounding the opening will be vegetated MSE walls, and that will be true around both pedestrian walkways as well.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Is that grade on the approach from Colonia going to remain as steep as it is? Because it's quite a flow of water comes down there in the heavy rain events with, well, at this time anyway, or previous events. It's carried quite a lot of sediment with it.
Well, whether the grade runs at 10% or 12% or 8%, you're still going to have the same amount of runoff. So I think that's a matter for our design engineers to make sure that they design satisfactory catchments and a satisfactory storm management flow so that the sediments don't make it to the stream.
So you come
And that would be, yes?
it come down like this off Colonia, and then it looks like it curves. Is that
It does. It curves. It descends toward the right, and then it curves off to the left as you're looking down Colonia. And then it climbs up to the development plateau on the other side. So there's the curve is showing on that diagram there is relatively, that's a tight curve. That's a 50K curve. So you have to slow to 50 kilometers to successfully negotiate that safely.
I was going to say, if we make it slower, I don't think that would be a bad thing. I've got Councillor Frayden and then Councillor Hutchins to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions with your engineering design. I noticed your retaining wall, and I'm assuming that would be like the ones upstream from that, which are Gabion, I believe that's what they're called?
Well, mechanically stabilized earth and Gabion can have the similar aesthetic outcome.
Yeah. What I'm wondering though is you're going to construct that wall below the water line, correct?
No, nothing goes below the water line.
Shows well as it says here on the plan. It goes on the inlet of the bridge. It'll go right to the bottom of the face of the bridge, right? Correct? It'll go below the foundation.
No, it's not intended to. The Q200, which is the 200-year storm flow.
So it'll go right to just the foundation of the bridge.
That's correct.
Bridge structure itself. So
Yes.
what remediation works are you proposing to control that erosion problem that would undermine in there? Are they gonna key some heavy riprap in there?
Did you want to comment?
Just
The-
to protect the integrity of that structure, because
The,
it's gonna be in
see,
the
that,
open.
that would be done in the moment, if you will, in a conversation between our environmental consultant contractor and the design engineers to make sure 100% that this creek integrity is maintained right from start of construction to end of construction and Q200 beyond that. So at some level, we need to determine what the material is that's underneath the foundations in that point to determine what we will need to make sure that it is armored against erosion or undermining.
Yeah, I understand that. I just wanted to ensure that there are measures gonna be mitigation to the structure itself, so the footings would be
Right.
adequately
Right.
protected with some sort of riprap design, I'm assuming.
I agree, and
So-
everything we do is going to be observed by staff.
Okay.
And everyone in Ladysmith is going to be watching what we do, and it is our goal to have a perfect structure, perfectly protected.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, one more time, and then I'll go to Councillor Hutchins, who's been waiting patiently.
So have there been a large number of seasonal observations as to what kind of debris comes down there? Because certainly logs have in different times.
Well, there's on the drawings you can see there's quite a bit of freeboard, if you will, between the top of the 200-year storm and the top of the inside of the structure to accommodate debris torrent. Now, I would imagine that this is a pretty well managed stream, and I don't know that anyone's done, or someone probably has done, a debris torrent risk assessment of this creek. And if necessary and deemed required, then we'll have to do a debris torrent risk assessment. But there's no question in my mind that this structure will accommodate a debris torrent.
The normal freeboard, we call it, from water level to inside the structure.
If you'd like to speak, you need to take the microphone.
It's Ken Rebell,
Thank you.
Macaroni Engineers.
For bridge design purposes, the typical, we call it freeboard, so from the Q200 level to the underside of structure is normally 1.5 meters. That's sort of the standard clearance for all ministry bridges. Now again, we look at that just to see if there are some unusual large trees or other things that could require that being more than 1.5, but I would say that the majority of all structures that I've seen within the province, the 1.5 meters seems to be the number that works relative to debris flowing underneath a bridge structure.
Thank you.
I can ask him a question.
Oh, Councillor Henderson, and yeah, Councillor Hutchins has a question as well.
Yeah, of the engineer.
Yeah.
Do you have an example of this work on Vancouver Island that we could go see?
I have, well, we'll find a couple example projects. Yes, the culverts have been used. It's really a low slope arch, so we can find some example projects. The spans all vary. This one was actually, there's a question before about retaining of the soil. The 19-meter span was picked so that the structure was long enough that the footings are advanced outside of the creek and at an elevation that's above the Q200. So the span of the arch was picked so that we didn't have that problem. But I will find, again, some example projects that this one is unique that it's on a curve. The normal situation is that it's on a straight alignment, so the photos I find will probably be on a straight alignment, but we'll definitely be able to find you some example structures that would help identify what it looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you. And no further speakers on my list. I'll go to Councillor Hutchins for a resolution.
Your Worship, I'd like to move that the Holland Creek Crossing project be referred to staff for consideration and recommendation, and as necessary be referred to the Parks and Rec Commission and the Advisory Design Panel for comment. If there's a seconder, I'll speak to that.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Arnett.
Yeah, I appreciate the sense of urgency, and I believe staff have heard that in terms of getting some recommendations and consideration, but a project like this, even a fraction of this scale in terms of impact on the community, in terms of going through a park, usually doesn't come to our table without Two things. Comment and recommendation from staff, as well as usually if it impacts a commission's jurisdiction, as the Parks and Rec Commission that have spent a fair amount of time deliberating on many aspects of the Holland Creek Trail, for them not to have a say and take a look at potential aesthetics of this crossing, maybe not the engineering component, but the aesthetics of it, I think it would do us all a disservice. So I would like to refer that to those groups.
Thank you. So the motion, do you have it there, Ms. Winter?
I can read it again.
Yeah.
It was moved that, it would be good to know if I got it. It was moved that the Holland Creek crossing project be referred to staff for comment and recommendation, and as necessary to the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee and the Advisory Planning Commission for comment.
APC or ADP?
ADP.
Advisory Design Panel.
Yeah, just to be clear. And that was seconded by Councillor Arnett. Councillor Arnett.
I seconded the motion because it's important to make sure that we have all the checks and balances, but I do believe that the proponent deserves an efficient process around that.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Eller. Appreciate your cohorts. Thank you for coming, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item 6.1, item 6, proclamations. 6.1, National Public Works Week. We proclaim May 20th to 26th, 2018 National Public Works Week in the town of Ladysmith and call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contribution which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. That's page 18 in the agenda packet. Item 6.2, National Missing Children's Month and National Missing Children's Day, page 19 in the agenda package. We proclaim May as the Child Finds Green Ribbon of Hope Month and May 25th as National Missing Children's Day. Urge all citizens to wear a green ribbon as a symbol of hope for the recovery of all missing children and to remain vigilant in our common desire to protect and nurture the youth of our province. Now moving on to development applications. Number 7.1, zoning amendment and development permit application for subject property set 431 First Avenue. Pages 20 through 36 in the agenda package, a two-part, or probably more than a two-part. A five-part recommendation.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Yes, and to the proponents, that's the nicest looking package I've seen come through in a while. So there, I know there's some things, but thank you for taking on that building. That's definitely...
Thank you very much. We're very excited to be part of the community.
Well, thank you so much for becoming part of our community, and we'll look forward to the process as you move forward. Thank you so much. Sorry to make you sweat it out in here, but you're welcome to stay as long as you like, but you don't have to stay until the end. Item 7.2, OCP and zoning and bylaw amendment application for the subject property at 900 Russell Road. We have a three-part staff recommendation, pages 37 through 40 in the agenda package, and the recommendations are that council consider the application to amend the official community plan by placing parks and open space designation on the dedicated parkland, and the zoning bylaw by changing the zoning of a portion of the property at 900 Russell Road from single dwelling residential to swingle. Your giggling is what got me. From school teacher to schoolmate. Single dwelling residential small lot A, R1A, and to add park zoning for the property legally described as Lot A, District Lot 67, Oyster District Plan, EPP 24148. Number 2, having given consideration to Section 475 of the Local Government Act, direct staff to refer the proposed OCP amendment to the Seminis First Nation pursuant to the town's Memorandum of Understanding. And number 3, direct staff to work with the applicant regarding land use matters and a community amenity contribution, commence the preparation of the OCP amendment bylaw and the zoning bylaw amendment bylaw for application 3360-18-04 and report the results of the neighborhood information meeting to council. Moved by Councillor Hutchins. Nope.
I can, but I got a question as well.
Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Arnett, and a question by Councillor Hutchins.
Your Worship, through you, on page 38, there is a picture, a map or plan, and I don't quite understand. There's a kind of a double-ended shepherd's hook on the little road that goes to the park. I don't know what that symbol means, but how do I it seems to have kind of a rather large lot, and I'm not sure how I would, either side of that road, how I'd access the lands beyond the first lot. If you know what I'm talking about.
I think I see what you're talking about.
Like, this is a big lot, and it's supposed to be a small lot, and I don't know how I would get to the back of this big lot, or I can get to these ones, but how do I get to this one?
So, through the staff, I think you're talking about this, right, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the long finger of R1A that is
And the
behind,
stubby finger one.
behind parcels 3 through 6. If those are small lots, how are you going to access them? They'd only be accessible via the park.
They're in between the phase 1 under the current zoning, lots 2 and 3. There'll be a sort of a stub road going in there.
Still,
So that shows.
yeah. But
So-
still, between that road and the road that connects to Craig Road, there's probably room for 6 lots, small lots there, but there's no way to access them.
Well, the layout hasn't been done for that section yet. We haven't done the layout. This
I'd
is
be
just-
curious
this
to see
map
how a
is just
layout would
basically
actually-
showing the
Zoning.
lands that would
Yeah.
be
The
zoned.
lands,
Yeah,
okay.
not the layout. It's not
Sorry.
a layout plan. And that symbol just means, it's just showing that that property is hooked. That's over a road. That's just a symbol that surveyors use.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have Councillor Patterson and then Friesenhan.
Just in regard to the piece of property at the end of Craig Road, where it's kind of got that Z,
It's an S.
that
Oh, which one?
this little
Oh, okay,
thing
yeah.
here. Will there be access to the park from Craig Road?
Yeah, there was supposed to be a pedestrian.
Yeah, so Craig Road,
You got to take the mic. You can go up to the podium if you want.
Okay. So Craig Road is here.
Yep.
And it extends around here. There will be access to the park, so that was part of the covenant that was placed on the development of the park. So there's access from here into the park, and this is the other part of the covenant was from Russell Road. So there is access into the park from Russell Road as well, and then there'll also be access from Craig Road to get into this park, and that's part of that covenant, that development
you.
covenant as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the same section that Councillor Hutchins was talking about, don't our the bylaws or don't our standards require that there's a turnaround there, like a bulb? And I don't see one.
So this is just the zoning layout, not the specific. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't believe I have anyone else on my list. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. So much stuff here. I don't want to miss a page.
There is a lot of stuff.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think that you're done. I don't see anything else with your names on the agenda for tonight. So we just broke it. So if you guys want to jump up.
I don't know where all the hot air's coming from.
Thank you. He sits beside you in the back row there. So moving on to bylaws, official community plan and zoning, OCP bylaw 2003, number 1488, amendment bylaw number 51, 2018, number 1942. So this is lots, as described, pages 41 through 42, 11 and 17 Kitchener, and the recommendation is that council adopt the OCP Plan Bylaw 2003-1488, Amendment Bylaw number 51, 2018, number 1952, moved by Councillor Arnett, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. 8.2, Town of Ladysmith Zoning Bylaw 2014, number 1860, Amendment Bylaw number 13, 2018, number 1953. So this is for the subject properties again at 11 and 17 Kitchener Street, and the recommendation is that council adopt the Town of Ladysmith Zoning Bylaw 2014, number 1860, Amendment Bylaw number 13, 2018, number 1953. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Frayden. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. OCP and zoning bylaw amendment application for Ladysmith Marina, D. Strongeth Arm, Rocky Creek Road subject properties as described in the agenda package, pages 45 through 56. The recommendation is that council proceed with first and second readings of bylaw 1960, cited as OCP bylaw 2003, number 1488, amendment bylaw number 53, 2018, number 1960, and B. bylaw 1961, cited as Town of Ladysmith zoning bylaw 2014, number 1860, Amendment Bylaw number 15, 2018, number 1861, and number 2, refer Bylaw 1960 and 1961 to public hearing. Moved by, Councillor Hutchins and Councillor Arnett. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. 8.4, Town of Ladysmith Zoning Bylaw 2014, number 1860, Amendment Bylaw number 16, 2018, number 1962. Subject property as described, pages 57 through 60. Staff recommendation is council proceed with first and second reading of Bylaw 1962, cited as Town of Ladysmith Zoning Bylaw 2014, number 1860, Amendment Bylaw number 16, 2018, number 1962. Number 2, waive the holding of a public hearing pursuant to section 464, bracket 2 of the Local Government Act. Direct staff to proceed with notification of the waiver of public hearing as required by the Local Government Act and the Procedures Bylaw. These are the Rocky Creek Road properties, moved by Councillor Frayden and seconded by Councillor Friesenhan. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. All right, moving on. Committee reports. So this week I have under 9.1 CVRD, Chamber of Commerce, Stocking Lake Advisory Committee, etc., pages 63 through 67 in the package, and I have a few recommendations. The recommendations are from Not-So-Mot Steering Committee. Sorry? No, I believe we got through them all. Looking through to staff. Okay. So recommendations from the Not-So-Mot Steering Committee. Number 1 is that Council and Staminas First Nation Council send letters to Transport Canada and Vancouver Port Authority indicating they are unhappy with the moorings of freighters in Ladysmith Harbour and surrounding waters, express their concern over the lack of consultation with stakeholders. And number 2, Council send a letter of support to Indigenous Services Canada, that's the new name, by the way, in support of Staminas First Nations application to include property at the intersection of Timberlands Road and Highway number 1 into their community reserve land in order to secure additional groundwater for their Shell Beach and Colette Bay communities. So those are the 2 recommendations from Not-So-Mot. And I move those, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Or a question?
So was the Not-So-Mot committee unhappy with the moorage or unhappy with the fact that there was no consultation with stakeholders?
Well, I could say that I was unhappy with the morages as well, but more so with the lack of consultation or discussion with the town before they started the pilot project. Also, I would say that based on our discussions with the chief, they are unhappy with them because there's 2 of them mooring in Colette Bay and there's been no consultation with Staminas at all.
Thank you.
Sorry, is that seconded by Councillor Arnett? Or a question? Question? Yeah. Councillor Arnett.
With respect to the second recommendation, that's the Cassidy Aquifer?
Yes.
and it is it the, I can't remember how we termed them, the first or the second? There's two parts to that aquifer, and if I remember the report way back that actually was given by a former director, it was the deeper part of the aquifer that was recommended to be accessed.
Yeah, so the study work is ongoing. This request is that we support their request to have the property included in the reserve lands, because Indigenous Services Canada will not participate in the studies that they need to determine what the proper aquifers are without it being included in the reserve.
Yeah, well, I would support that. I just was trying to determine.
So I think they're trying to determine what the best part of the aquifer to access would be.
Yeah,
So
getting fresh water to reserve is critical.
yes. Councillor Henderson.
Has that particular land got anything to do with the town of Ladysmith?
No.
So our support is moral support, it's not
It's-
legislative?
No, because it's within the regional district of Nanaimo.
Yes.
But as they're a community partner of ours, they just asked if we would provide a letter of support. They have several other local governments that they're approaching, as well as other agencies that they work with. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to the recommendations from the Waterfront Implementation Committee. The only recommendation is that we adopt the Waterfront Implementation Committee terms of reference included in your package.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 9.2, Councillor Hutchins.
Yes, and I would ask Councillor Patterson to help me on some of these because he took my place. There is 5 recommendations for your consideration on page 69 and 70. And the first one comes out of the March 15th meeting, the first 3. As you can see in the additional package, they received the Heritage Strategic Plan 2018 review attached. Stellar job by their membership as well as staff. Appoint Ann Rogers as the Ladysmith District Historical Society liaison to the Heritage Revitalization Advisory Commission, and Leslie Moore as the alternate. And I'm not sure if we should be using the word direct staff or request should be request staff to consider the suggestions of the Heritage Revitalization Advisory Commission in the final location of the Great Street plaque in the area of First Avenue and Gattaker Street. So move those 3 with changing that one word.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
And from the April 19th meeting, there's 2 recommendations. Direct staff to work with the owner of 210 Buller Street to install a second plaque at the owner's cost, and 2, advise the HRAC that any changes to the metal collage will require approval by council subject to the budget. So moved.
Seconded by Councillor Arnett. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. And Municipal Services.
2 recommendations from the March 12th meeting. That council directs staff to receive the report from the Director of Financial Services regarding the opportunity to establish a Vancouver Island-wide inter-community business license. And I'd like to move the second one at the same time. Direct staff to prepare an amendment to the Town of Ladysmith Inter-Community Business License Bylaw 2013, number 1839, to establish a Vancouver Island-wide inter-community business license. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Arnett. Discussion? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we're going through discussions with the ad hoc committee on the sale when it becomes legal of marijuana, and some municipalities are having different
Business
licenses and different business license fees. How does this fit in with the big scheme? Because we haven't decided how we're going to handle it, if we're going to charge more for a business license for a cannabis store, etc.
Good question, and I think that maybe we'll have to provide some direction to staff to make sure we incorporate that.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll take that in consideration. I'll report on the committee that we have this Thursday. Is that okay? And then we can come back to council with the resolution.
So would it be appropriate to adopt this now or table it?
No.
Sorry, this is just simply prepare an amendment. So
Yeah,
it's
there's
gotta come
nothing to
back.
adopt at this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. And Councillor Henderson, your reports on 82, 83, but no recommendations to this meeting. Did you have any high-level comments you want to share?
You're supposed to say no.
I was told to say no.
Hey, we're down to 25.9. We'll be back to room temperature in the next couple hours.
One of the interagency meetings I attended was actually at the extreme weather shelter. And there, the person that was supervising was saying that if there was any way in the future that could be open at some stages of the day, she herself, who has a lot of training, would like to work with sort of ready-to-rent coursework as well as financial management and that sort of thing in little workshops. So that was just, I found that interesting that there was someone who would have liked to work with that particular population because they've been there all night and that, you know, shared meals and things. So I just thought I'd mention that because it was something that came up in that location.
Yeah, and I think that the main justification for embarking on shelter initiatives like that is to start to make contact with the people who need help and then start to provide them access to help that can get them on the road to independence again. So well taken, and definitely something I think we need to follow up on when we have the capacity to do that, for sure. And the other interagency groups that are working on it, and see if like the LRCA can help facilitate some of that work as they move forward as well. Thank you for that. Councillor Patterson, pages 84 through 87, you have recommendations from the Parks, Rec and Culture Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do. You want me to read it, or you want to read it?
No, you read it.
Okay. That the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee advised council that the committee approves in principle the sign design and location for the Aggie Hall and field signage, providing sight lines for traffic will not be affected. So I have graciously been supplied by the Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture pictures if you want to see. The design is the same as what we have on the highway.
That's the whole thing.
Oh. Somebody photoshopped that in there. Is this who did this? Is this your work, Doc? Or is this the director's?
No, this is done by our great staff.
Okay, just checking.
Or his assistant.
Is there a seconder for that?
Not yet.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Patterson. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Probably could have got it through without the picture, but thank you for that.
I know, but he went to all the trouble to take it.
All right, 9.5, Councillor Friesenhan, and I believe yours was added as a late item here. So is there any recommendations? Nope. All right. And then Councillor Frayden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Safety Advisory Commission, the Liquid Waste Management Committee, and Protection Services did not meet this month, but Celebrations did, and there's, just to give everybody a heads up, the theme for this year is the Seaside Celebration. The next meeting will be at May 17th, and they're looking for volunteers, so anybody interested in volunteering for the next Celebrations Committee, it'd be nice if they could show up for the meeting on May 17th at 7 o'clock here at City Hall. Just one quick thing regarding the Protective Services is on Saturday, May 12th, the Ladysmith Search and Rescue is in conjunction with the Ladysmith Fire Rescue and Take 5 magazine will be hosting a Mastering Disaster Emergency Preparedness event from noon till 4 p.m. at the Ladysmith Fire Hall at 76th Avenue, and I think it'd be very interesting and for a lot of citizens to come and partake in that. The last one was very good.
Yeah, considering less than half of our population are actually, even by survey, which means you're kind to yourself, prepared for a disaster, it might be a good thing to attend. Councillor Arnett?
Mine was a bit of a late item as well, Mayor. I just wanted to mention with respect to the follow-up to ABICC for all of us that I'm very pleased with the follow-up around the reparations for marijuana legalization that we've been started on and involving the RCMP, so we're getting feedback from a variety of folks. The other was just that just the Vancouver Island Regional Library, its role in the community is expanding. We talked about people who are struggling and using our co-other shelter and what have you. It becomes the default place during the day, and the funding for the library system, as I mentioned before, has been going down over the years. We want council to support our ongoing campaign to have the BC government reinstate an adequate funding commitment to the library system, most particularly because it now literally has become the day program default for anybody who's struggling in communities across the island. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and council for those reports. Now we move on to the more reports. So 10.1 4th Avenue Reconstruction Plan, pages 88 through 99. We do have a recommendation. I'm wondering if the council would like to ask questions or discuss it somewhat before moving the recommendations, or we can take resolutions now. Did staff want to open the discussion in any particular way, or just have us reflect on the resolutions?
Your worship.
So move 1 through 4.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Councillor Friesenhan.
A couple of things. It said number 2 is confirmed bicycle path be located on 6th Avenue. I have no problem with that. One of the things I'd like to discuss though is we're talking about a secondary road, and I think having a standard for secondary roads throughout the town is probably a good idea. So one of the things I know that's happening right now is people are using the road as with bicycles. So like option number 5 to me is the ideal one for that purpose. And to have we've already designated 4th Avenue as the bicycle route. That was done 10 years ago.
More than that.
And then some.
More like 18 years ago.
And because it is being used by
2000.
bicycles, or if you don't allow for bicycles on 4th Avenue and you move it to the 6th Avenue, people will still use 4th Avenue.
Yeah.
So my preference is number 5, option 5. Having said that, the other portion is direct staff to proceed design drawings for phase from south of Pembroke to Bel Air. Personally, I would like to see us go from Bel Air 2 blocks the other way and do the 4th Avenue extension as a milling and overlay period.
Thank you. Good opening to the discussion. I knew I could count on you. So yeah, I got to be honest. I have significant challenges with what's here, specifically because, like Councillor Friesenhan had said, the traffic and the issues past Bel Air are insignificant. Not necessarily the pavement quality. There's a lot of crack sealing on it and stuff, but in terms of a conflict between vehicles and pedestrians and or bicycles, there is none down that end. To my knowledge, at least when I travel it, there's very little traffic down that way, and what traffic there is accommodated quite well. The concern I have is that, going back to the Councillor Friesenhan's first comment, is that you can say you're supposed to come up 4th Avenue, take a right onto Simons, take a left onto 6th, and then come back down and meet back up with 4th Avenue at Bel Air, but you're not going to direct people that way. So they'll continue to ride down 4th Avenue much as it is today, because that's the straight shot on a downhill grade. Instead, you're asking them to turn up a slight incline up 6th to Dunsmuir, hang a left onto 6th, and then kind of go up a slight incline again, and then down by the fire hall and through the path and down Lions Way, or Jameson, and then left onto Bel Air. You're trying to fight the natural path for a bicycle, both in terms of terrain and in terms of expediency. So I may, for less experienced cyclists or for children, the reality is that 6th Avenue is a 30-kilometer-an-hour zone, essentially from 2 blocks in before the rec center, all the way past the fire hall, with speed humps in some locations. Oh no, those have been removed. But is it even required in a 30-kilometer zone to have specialized bike infrastructure when really at a 30K speed, modern road designs are calling for bikes and vehicles to share the road at those speeds? And the speeds that are through there may get up to closer to 50, but it just seems like what came back to council based on our engagement about 4th Avenue was that the 4th Avenue corridor design needed to be something for the next century kind of thing. And so what we came back with was, and again I'm summarizing, that's too expensive. It may not fit in certain areas. So instead we'll say, okay, we'll just go back to almost what seems like a step back from the original plan for the 4th Avenue corridor and just tell them that bicycles have to take a detour. So, I was quite disappointed when I saw this report. I understand the financial realities of it, but it doesn't seem to make the 4th Avenue corridor that main collector corridor that I thought we were directing to look at when it came back to council based on the public engagement. So for me, it's a bit of a letdown. And then the fact that the real area of complaint is between White Street and Bel Air, other than maybe the appearance of the crack ceiling on the place between Bel Air and Hambrook, I don't recall ever having a complaint about that section of 4th Avenue other than maybe it's ugly. I drove it again today. The significant challenge to that road and the lowest quality of that road is between White and Bel Air. So I understand maybe that's more expensive work to do, but that's the work that actually needs to be done in my opinion.
So Your Worship, that is the direction that council given us. It's on the page number 88. Number 2, direct staff to work, start at Hambrook and continue north. That's why if council wishes to start in any other intersection, we can do that for sure. And again, Your Worship, at the end of the day, if option 1 is what council chooses to do, it could be done. It's just more costly. So that's why we presented all the options.
Thanks. I have Councillors Hutchins, then Patterson, Henderson, and Fraden.
So my understanding, and I appreciate the common sense approach you brought to this plan, because my understanding is you're not dictating that a person can't take their bike down a public road, but the building of a bike path is more cost effective and efficient along 6th Avenue than it is along 4th Avenue. But if I want to take my pedally up or down 4th Avenue, I can do that just like I can do any other. Right. So if we are going to facilitate bike paths or encourage the construction of bike paths, it's obviously fiscally prudent to do it, but you're not banning people. One question I have, and sometimes council makes a mistake. You might have noticed that. So, no, I appreciate we gave you direction to go from Hamburg, but when I was reading this report, I said, we did all that work around French Street and around the school. Why wouldn't we actually expand on that? Like, why are you supporting council's direction to go from Hamburg rather than the needed area of White Street to Methuen or whatever, or just simply do the next 2 blocks after?
I'm not sure. I don't think this is on, by the way. Oh, it is? Okay. So, when I got here, it was already set up that we were building this strip of road, and so I just assumed we were building this strip of road. So, I've never really questioned where we should start. I'm just following what
what I was told. I'm not suggesting to you that it makes, I mean, there's probably sections of the road that are in maybe worse shape than the first piece, and the first piece is a little flatter. It's easier to construct, but it's from my perspective, I'm not that concerned where council tells us we'll build the section of road exactly where you tell us to build it. And if it's not the first section, then we'll build it in another section. As soon as you get out of that section, so that section's relatively easy to build, and you can see the cross section's a bit wider. We've allowed parking on both sides there because we've got a flatter, it's actually a narrower right-of-way, but it's actually a flatter area, so it's easier to build. And as soon as you get into the next section, you're into the most challenging, that's the most challenging section of the corridor, is after Bel Air, is the most challenging section of that corridor.
Bel Air to White is. Bel Air to White.
Yeah. Is a very...
Well, because of the grade changes.
You get grade change in that section, you get it on both sides of the road, and there's some areas down farther where you only get it on one side, but on this section you get it on both sides, and it's going to be, if we adopt a plan that, like the first plan has a width of about 12.5 meters of built infrastructure. Doesn't matter how you configure it, but it's about 12.5 meters of built infrastructure. If you put that width through that corridor, it's going to be challenging, very expensive, because you're going to have retaining walls on both sides of the corridor. And so we were trying to incorporate some comments that we received, the value of parking. There was a fair bit of desire for people to have the ability to park on the one side of the road, because if you look at the way the houses are aligned, it made a little more sense that it be on the high side. And so we were trying to incorporate some parking along the corridor. And if you add another 3 meters for the bike lanes, which is 1.5 meters on each side, then the width becomes about 12.5 meters.
And so, how much more would it cost? I guess, phrase the question, do we have the money in the bank if council said, no, we want you to do from Bel Air to White, no, Bel Air to Methuen, isn't it?
Well, you'd have to go past Methuen because
White.
That's where the problem is.
Yeah, but Bel Air to White. Versus from Hambrook to Bel Air, how much more would be needed in the budget?
If we went through that stretch and you required retaining walls on either side, you
No, just your options 2, 3, and 4, whatever. Not option 1.
Oh, okay. So 2, 3, and 4, it would be quite similar to the
350 meters.
Yeah. Yeah, we have enough money to do around, with a buffer, around 350 meters. If you adopt the plan as it's shown here, it narrows down in the areas where we have the elevations. So it's the cost would be roughly the same as doing it in the flatter area, because we're doing a different cross section in the flatter area.
Okay, so we could actually afford to do that this year then?
About 350 meters of construction, yes.
Thanks.
I'm going to move that amendment.
I'm going to move the amendment.
Okay, just wait. Councillor Patterson, and then Henderson, Fraden, and Friesenhan.
I believe my question was answered.
Okay. Councillor Henderson.
I don't really recall the details, but was there some consideration given to tying in underground infrastructure because old meets new at some point on that road, and you wanted, or it was suggested that you start where that tie-in would logically take place?
The costs that we've given here, so they're just over $2,000 a lineal meter to construct. Those include complete underground improvements, and if you look at it, it's about 50%. So about roughly $1,000 a meter is underground improvements, and 1,000 is above ground improvements.
But where on that stretch does old meet new?
Well, I'm not.
Higgledy-piggledy?
Yeah, I'm not. At this point, I'm not 100% sure exactly.
It's
it's
a tough question to answer.
But we have planned for all new underground, curb gutter, sidewalk, storm, everything new, so that we're not constructing anything over old infrastructure.
And if you found anything that was good, you leave it?
Yeah, I think there is actually a section in there that's relatively
Yeah.
new, and the plan isn't on that section to replace that piece.
Yeah.
From the lane to
So I have a speakers list.
Excuse me.
So let's not break down here. You're coming up anyway. Councillor Fraden, then Friesenhan. Sorry, Councillor Henderson, are you? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Remember us talking about a roundabout at Bel Air? Did staff look at that, or?
We haven't looked at that yet, no. We wanted to nail down what the cross-section was gonna look like, and then the plan is then we, I believe, have 3 intersections that we're looking at, doing some detailed analysis about those, and Bel Air is the one intersection that we're looking at. Yes.
So you're still forthcoming with that information then, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you. Councillor Friesenhan.
You're suggesting then from Bel Air to White that we go with 2 lanes of traffic and a sidewalk and that's it?
2 lanes of traffic, a parking lane, and the existing sidewalk.
Well, whether it's existing or not, make it irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. And rather than a parking lane, I would rather see the bicycle lanes put in there for an extra half a meter. It should fit, shouldn't it? With no parking.
Yeah, I think it will, and I kind of agree, but if we do that, like, you have to commit to either putting bike lanes on the entire corridor or putting them, like, I don't think we want to have the corridor where we go down and we have a section where there's bike lane and then we don't have bike lane. If we're going to put bike lanes, on-road bike lanes, we need to commit to that in the beginning, and that's basically going to set the stage, because we're going to end up with, at a bare minimum, you're going to end up with the 2 3.5 meter travel lanes, 2 1.5 meter bike lanes, and then if there's parking, then the 2.5 meter parking, depending on whether it's.
Which brings me back to the initial thing, is no parking. We're building a collector road, which is main purpose of a road is to move traffic, not to park on it. So my preference is, again, number 5, and that's what I'll be voting for.
Thank you. Just to respond to that comment, though, you got to look at the dozens of vehicles that are parked along there right now through that corridor. So if you're saying through the whole 4th Avenue corridor, no more boulevard parking?
My suggestion is that the people want to have parking there, they pay for it as a local improvement.
Thank you. Through to staff?
I just sort of want to make one comment about the way it's laid out. So I basically presented, so the first option was the original option that had the multi-use path on the side, okay? And then we developed sort of a suite of options, which are 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the way all those options are in the plan that you've shown here, they're all incorporated into every one of those 4 options
at different areas,
and it's just in different areas down the corridor. So I just want to make sure that
okay. Yeah. And to be clear, you can't just, the way that the layout works, you can't widen that sidewalk into a multi-use path. The existing.
So we looked at that.
And then you run into telephone poles on your bike.
Well, if you look at the existing sidewalk, which is actually in very good shape in most of the area, it's a very good sidewalk. But the power poles, big power poles, are right up against the side of it. So and then you have a little bit of encroachment in areas of people's
bushes
walls
or
and things. So it makes that 1.5 meters very tight, and the 1.5 meters is all we can handle with our snow removal equipment. So we looked at the potential of moving the pole. Okay, so we can move the poles. Those poles are quite expensive to move, but we could move poles out to widen that, so you could get a multi-use pathway there. It would be fairly expensive, and the other piece is that in the steeper areas, it's going to require a retaining wall on the lower portion. The other piece so we did do some consulting about these multi-use paths, and ICBC, in our conversation with ICBC, are saying they're not an ideal they're not an ideal solution. You don't want to put bicycles on a multi-use path because the expectation of a driver when they come out of a lane or a driveway
Is a
only to
pedestrian.
look left, and they don't look right, and the vehicles, bikes are traveling quickly, and there's a lot of accidents. So they're saying if you have to put bike paths, you want to put them on the road, and the way we've also configured them, you can see it's the parking lane and then the bike lane is on the outside. And, you
Right.
can, and there's a number of places in Nanaimo that I've done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Patterson again. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with moving the bike path up to 6th Avenue. If, like Councillor Friesen says, this is a collector road, there's going to be a lot more traffic, but it's also a road that goes right through a residential area. And very, very few of those houses are serviced by alleys, so parking is going to be at a minimum, and with a bike lane, I envision a lot of vehicles using that for parking. And just as the director brought up now, is with on 6th Avenue, you have in fact, I don't think you have any driveways backing out onto 6th Avenue on the opposite side of the fire hall, the schools, the community center. Oh, you do, you have those 6 houses at the end. So moving the bikes up there would eliminate a lot of hazards. So
An experienced cyclist can still drive with traffic on foot.
yeah, if they choose to use 4th Avenue, that's their choice. But if we put bike lanes in and there is minimal parking, I would rather see us move the bike lanes, have the boulevard so the streetscape looks good, and on-street parking.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else on my list. Was there an appetite to discuss? We do have a resolution saying Hambrook to Bel Air, but to discuss Bel Air to White as being the priority. So I would entertain a amendment. Councillor Hutchins?
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment that we, number 4 be changed from Bel Air to White Street.
Second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, on the amendment?
Yeah, on the amendment.
All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Amendment carries. On the resolution as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.2, bollards on First Avenue. And we do have a recommendation. I wasn't sure if council had the opportunity to receive some feedback that we had gotten from the president of the Downtown Business Association. But there were some protests that they didn't support bollards.
Yes.
For aesthetics reasons and for other reasons, and questions on why they weren't consulted, and that the money would be better spent on downtown washrooms. However, the downtown washroom project is crawling along. It is still crawling. I think it's still going. So that's not an either and or scenario. I just have a question through to staff and whoever may have the corporate memory from a staff perspective, but I thought the bollards on First Avenue came out of some engagement with the business owners back in 2013-14. I thought that was part of our downtown improvement.
Actually came out earlier, if I could. The owner of Brian Bancroft. I believe there was an incident in his building or an incident close to his building, and this is going back 10 years, I'm sure. So as a downtown, and I think he was chair of the chamber or chair of the downtown merchants at the time, brought this forward and petitioned us to start doing it. And it's been a long time coming, and I just can't imagine. I mean, you can see I don't know how many buildings have been altered, changed. No lives have been lost and nobody has been injured yet. But I don't think today we'd be putting in this type of parking without bollards. As you can see in Duncan, they put in angle parking and they had to put bollards in to stop them from jumping onto the sidewalk. So this is long overdue, and appreciate the work staff have done. So I'd like to move 1, 2, and 3.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, Seconded by Councillor Patterson. So questions through to staff then. Or go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
So I had a question.
Go ahead.
In my discussions with a member from Public Works, he was saying that
Employee.
most of the accidents, and I don't know if it was a study or not, but most of these types of accidents, although I remember Bancroft Building and the health food store, is when people pull up on an incline.
That's, yeah.
And they want to try and make sure that they're right up against the curb, so they touch the gas. Or sometimes they touch the gas too hard, and they're now the front door. So we're proposing to start on the
High side.
downhill.
No. On the high side. Front of Johnson's building, isn't it?
No.
So, sorry for the confusion.
Okay.
I'll explain the confusion.
Okay.
We are starting on the high side, and I think the report reflects that.
The address that was used?
No,
Picture.
when we did the diagram, the intent of this diagram, you weren't supposed to read the numbers. You were just supposed to look at where the bollard was installed.
You mean I finally read the whole thing and I wasn't supposed to?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You actually you analyzed it more than I did because I didn't pick up on that piece. Maybe it's because I talked to them and we talked about which ones may be the ones, but. So, Councillor Patterson, is that good for now? Okay. So, just a couple of questions and comments. Sorry, Councillor Arnett, were you wanting to ask a question? I was about to call the vote because I didn't have anybody on my list, but. Okay, so we got the whole team on the list. Councillor Arnett, Friesenhan, Henderson, and Frayden.
I just want to say that I think the tradition of this council, particularly with respect to the small business community that are the lifeblood of our town, is to consult and to let them know what our plans are and ask for implications. I'm finishing my third term on council. This has been an issue of safety through all 3 terms. There has been discussion after discussion, lots of feedback, and if there's some folks right now, and I have great respect for folks who wrote, feel they weren't consulted, it isn't because of that hasn't been our tradition, and it certainly isn't because we don't have a historical case. So I will be voting in support of the bollards.
Thank you. Councillor Friesenhan, then Henderson, then Frayden. Friesenhan.
Actually, I'm going to vote against, mainly because the recommendation or the council direction was to investigate and report back with options. There are no options in this report at all. There's more things you can do than just putting bollards in, which is the most expensive option. So I'd vote against it for that. And the other thing is, where all of a sudden we're doing $30,000 worth of work that was never asked for?
Well, we have different recollections. I'll get staff's comment
So
on
your
that
worship,
last
that's the
part.
money that we have in the budget for dealing with boilers. That's why we put it over there, and that's
Yeah, I
good,
was going to say it
so we
wasn't
can
the
afford.
budget.
And it was our
Specifically.
understanding from this council that they always were talking about boilers. If the understanding was incorrect, I would be happy to provide that options.
And if I might, the council direct staff to investigate and report back on options for the installation of bollards or other safety improvements.
Okay. It's always an option, if that's what council chooses, to ask for more options. Wait, this one goes back, I think, when was that resolution? Beginning of 2017, over a year and a half?
January 29th, 2016.
Okay, so 2.5 years ago, so we can get there eventually. Councillor Henderson.
With the bollard placement that's in the diagram, that is the site of one of the mishaps, is it not?
3 of them.
Yes. Oh, and that's
Because it's basically from the CIBC up to the kitchen place, I think. 9 parking spots there, right? Yeah.
so. Does that automatically translate into 160 bollards? Like 20 years later, we get our bundles of 8 done, or
Yes.
is it necessary to have 160 of them, just physically?
There's 160 angled parking spots on First Avenue, so there is, as there was a comment, there might be more risk if it's on an uphill slope, but I would say that there's probably risk if there's on a downhill slope. So I don't see there's really that much difference that you would put a bollard in one spot and you wouldn't put it in another spot on an angled parking. So we're proposing that council do it over a phased-in approach, and we only have $30,000, so that's why we said $30,000 a year, but that'll take you
A while.
60 years, yeah, a long time.
Well, that's why it says in the report contemplating
Exactly, yeah.
changes in that long term.
So have other alternatives come up if you're looking at similar kind of geographies or topographies in other towns? Is it always bollards that is used? I know sometimes you hit those rubber blocks that stop you, but I guess they're not historically correct.
One of the factors that sort of just led us to stay with bollards was that you can put a bollard in and it's quite a small diameter, and so it doesn't really take an awful lot of the sidewalk up. So there are other options. Other people have used different planters. There's a number of different things you could use. We're trying to find something that's really simple, doesn't impede people walking back and forth out of their cars, and also is easy for our sidewalk machine, because we do we do snow clearing downtown, and it's already challenging enough for the guys clearing the snow in the downtown core.
Excuse me, I'll just say those rubber blocks that mimic a curb but give you warning are used down at Coronation Mall, where they've had several of their pillars run into, and I don't know if that's not attractive enough, perhaps.
My granddaughter ran over one of those and creamed our car.
She didn't clean the building.
I was going to say that when this, where the source was there, that somebody actually went over and into their bollards.
The bollards that we've installed, these are structural bollards. If you look at the diagram
They
on
go
here,
down.
There's a Schedule 40 pipe. There's reinforcing steel in them. They are meant to stop a vehicle that's moving at a fair clip. So.
Yeah.
They're not just, you can put little parking stops, but if someone steps on the accelerator, they're going to bounce right over top of that.
Yep.
So these are meant to stop the vehicle.
Thank you. Councillor Fraden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I had the same concerns that Councillor Friesen had regarding the resolution details and looking at other safety improvements. But one thing I wanted to know, does staff identify any liability or risk issues with these with the bollard proposals, with pedestrian conflicts or anything like that?
No, we haven't investigated. I'm not really aware. I mean, I guess you could walk down the street and run into one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know some
Yep.
communities have done that, and they've looked at it and they've said that they do cause it. There are some issues with when you have pedestrian flows, especially when you have an event in your town or you have an increase of people coming to it constricts your pedestrian volumes in such a way that there is issues with buggies and stuff like that, and handicapped people, their mobility is constricted with these bollards.
Thank you. Councillor Arnett.
Well, I think the director really articulated the point I was going to make, and that is that sitting at the table, each one of those reports of a vehicle crashing over the sidewalk into a building on First Avenue has been a car out of control at high speed, unexpected, and the reason that bollards were talked about was to absorb the impact and to keep people safe, and to design them in such a way that they were aesthetically pleasing as well. So that's the history as I always understood it while sitting at the table. So again, I support putting them in.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else on my list, so I'll make a few comments. Sorry?
Can I just ask one question?
Mr.
So,
Goodall?
do you want me to buy one of these and bring it in so council can at least look at what this one looks like, or?
I know what it looks like. It looks like the bottom of our light standards with a little ball on top, basically.
I just.
And they're not, but they're not as big as the light standards, are they? Maybe we should bring one in.
Yeah, they're fairly.
Yeah, we've already got them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, couple of comments. I do see in the design there that the tops are removable, so the city manager and I had talked about the possibility at some time in the future of looking at solar lighting caps and stuff that you can get for them. And it's not an issue for now, but because to wire them, like the ones in Duncan downtown, but that was a whole streetscape project, so I think in the context it was easy for them to lay down the wiring, right? For us, that means ripping up all the sidewalks downtown and completely redoing First Avenue, which is maybe not reasonable, but I have seen on some of the, and then I started researching bollards last week, some of the solar caps as well. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clear the expectations. So the one that we're buying, the head is actually not removable. It is removable, but it's just for installation purposes.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to go to an LED head, you gotta buy another boiler.
Different boiler.
And that's what we included on the report, so you can see. But it's substantially more expensive. I think it's on top of that price. We gotta pay another $1,500.
Yeah, it's
so
expensive.
it'll be, yeah.
So, but back to the real point was, even anecdotally, I can speak of 9, I think, incidents in the last several years. I can't remember exactly when the first one was, and that was specifically the CIBC flower box there. Yeah, so I'm only talking about the ones I remember, but that one went into the CIBC flower box, Martin's, Johnson's building, your building. My building was only saved because the facade at the top caught the top of the truck, so it caved in the overhang. Still haven't got my sign fixed, but I'll have to talk to the landlord about that. But yeah, so it's been significant incidents, and there's, it causes people, sort of stress, that they feel uncomfortable in their jobs if they sit at the front window and they do that work every day and they don't want to sit there because they're afraid because it's already happened and it just so happened that they're not at their desk that day. Or you look at the economic impact. I couldn't get lunch from Martin for like a week. But it has an impact, and although I'm not 100% sure that 160 bollards through the whole town is maybe necessary, there's a clear pattern of focus of these issues in that core area of town between CIBC and the Old Town Bakery. So I look forward to at least putting that in place, and then we can gauge it. The nice thing about not having a budget item for 160 bollards is you don't do it and then decide that something better came along down the road. I think this is a reasonable expense and safety improvement for the people that have been impacted the most, and then we can look at if there are unintended consequences and see if there are other decisions moving forward. And I'm happy that these are the kind of bollards that aren't, some bolts put into decorative bollards, I guess you would call those ones. That will actually stop a vehicle because they're designed to do that. So I'm happy to support it. I don't have anyone else on my speakers list, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Frayden and Friesenhan opposed. The motion carries. 4th Avenue repairs, Rocky Creek crossing. This agenda is getting closer to the end, but it feels heavier every time I pick it up.
Call the question.
Nobody's moved it yet.
Move 1 through 4.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Councillor Patterson.
The item number 2, omit approach slabs from the design. Just for information, what are approach slabs?
Okay, so when you build a bridge, you have the outer abutments that the bridge sits on, so you end up excavating out kind of a large hole. Then you put your bridge down on the abutment, and then you fill the dirt back in and bring the road up. What inevitably happens is you never quite get enough compaction on the dirt before just before the edge of the bridge, and so over time
pavement settles.
You find the asphalt sort of settles, and you get a little bump over the bridge. So on all highway bridges, like MOT bridges, anything with a design speed over 80 kilometers, you have to put these approach slabs. So they're basically just a slab that connects onto the bridge and transitions through that area so that you don't get the settlement. This is a slow speed road, and it will be relatively easy for us to patch asphalt, so it seemed like a reasonable compromise to save a little bit of money.
Mr. Friesenhan.
Would you need those approaches if you put a concrete one in? Probably not.
You know, I would say that you probably wouldn't, because the most of it's then earth and fill. You don't have that.
Exactly.
You don't have that sharp contrast.
Because of that, I mean, the concrete box culvert is going to give us exactly the same thing as a precast concrete bridge, but at $110,000 less, and you don't have to worry about the approach.
So if I can put through to staff, what was the reason going for the precast bridge rather than the box culvert?
So there was recommendation from the consultant that they felt that the ongoing maintenance, like the long-term maintenance of the bridge, would be better than either of the culvert or the arch. One of the main reasons is that if you do the pipe arch or the culvert, you're actually working in the stream channel, so it's not going to be like the bridge, the arch that you were shown earlier in the day, where the footings are out of the wetted area. The footings in this case will be right down in the creek, because it's not a large enough structure. So we are concerned about timing. Once this is designed, we're going to be building this in the winter period, and we're concerned about high volumes of water flow that could be occurring while we're trying to build foundations down in the creek. And by using the bridge, you never have to go into the wetted perimeter of the creek. You're above that.
Thank you, Councillor Arnett.
I just wanted to say that I can't wait to see this thing get repaired. I spent considerable time going back and forth to Forest Field over the weekend. And when we have traffic volumes in there, we really need that corridor opened up. Especially in the winter, we will want that corridor opened up. So I'd just like to see it expedited.
Thank you. I had another question. Sorry, Councillor Henderson, did you?
I didn't put my hand up
Go ahead.
either, but, is it really worth the relatively small, well, not relatively small, I guess, but the savings to eliminate these approach slabs? Because that settling does occur. Everybody's done that little rise, and there's enough patching going on around town. Is somebody going to be that vigilant that the continuous maintenance is going to be worth the initial savings?
It's a judgment call, but we're trying to do this as cost effectively as we can, and we look at the pros and cons of it. So there is going to be some additional maintenance required if we don't put those in, but we figured that the additional cost of maintenance would be relatively low over the long period than putting the slabs in. So it's a judgment. I don't think there's any. When I talked to the engineer, because I'm not that experienced about the approach of slabs, he said to me many municipalities that put bridges in and on slow speed roads like this and omit the approach slabs because it's an area they can save some money.
And then that whole thing around the geotechnical engineer talking about I guess whether or not there's going to be some subsidence or something. Is that the difference with the footings?
No, the geotechnical engineer will, before we build, we'll have to go in and do some drilling, and if they find that the material on either side of the creek is really competent material, then you won't need to use piles. But if the material is maybe not as good, then we want to put piles in. So
that may not be an option. It'll be a decision.
Exactly.
Based on
Yep.
Okay. So a quick comment then. So back to the choice of the bridge versus the culvert. So the recommendation of the consultant that you concur with, based on the recommendation, is that spending some more to complete this project with the bridge will be long-term benefit in terms of capital or operational costs and maintenance costs?
That and the associated risk with doing it in the period that we're going to be forced to build this bridge in.
So now we're talking about, then that was my next question, you're saying in the winter, so this is going to remain as it is until the winter?
Well, no, but we'll just look at timelines.
Yep.
So We've got to now get a geotech in to do geotech drilling. Then they have to do the design of the bridge. So we're talking probably all of that work around 3 months to get that work complete. And then we're into construction, and they're estimating a 4-month construction window for the bridge, 5 months for the culverts. So you're into potential wet conditions.
So, sorry, you said how many months for the bridge and then 5 months for the culvert?
Yes, the engineer's estimate for the culvert is either the poured-in-place box culvert or the arch are 1 month longer than building the bridge.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Friesenham, then Henderson. So just because I feel like sometimes I miss hands, I keep looking, but try and get your hand out there and then I won't miss them.
Again, I just can't see the taxpayer having to pay a little extra, 2% extra for something that is going to work exactly the same in the long run, but save a little bit of work and, in fact, a little more work. But the timing on it, and the culvert, why would it take it 3 months to design the culvert?
Through the staff.
Your worship, that's a decision for a question for the engineers. That's the information we get.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
So that 4 months or whatever, is that going to be reduced traffic or no traffic with a bridge?
There'll always be, we're always, doesn't matter what option you pick, we're always,
I was told that by Friesenham, but I thought I'd ask you.
It's going to be single lane. It's a little easier to do with a bridge than it is with the culverts, but the plan is that there will always be single lane access. And for some reason, if something unusual happened, we will be able to get people out the other direction.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Frayden and Friesenham opposed. Motion carries. 10.4, appointment of Chief Ladysmith Fire Rescue. Recommendation is that council appoint Ray Delcourt as Chief Ladysmith Fire Rescue effective April 1st, 2018. Moved by Councillor Arnett, seconded by Councillor Patterson.
And that we also include in that motion that we send thank you letters to the 2 departing longtime members.
Well, we can do that as a second item. That shouldn't. What's that?
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't I already sign them? Yes. Thank you. Sorry, that was moved by Councillor Arnett, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. 10.5, adjustment to water billing accounts. Recommendation is to approve adjusting water billing due to leaks for the following properties. Numbers identified for a grand total of about $8,683 for the 2 properties. Pages 124 through 126.
I'll move it, but I have a question to ask.
Yep, go ahead. Moved by Councillor Hutchins. Seconder? Councillor Frayden? Yep, and Councillor Hutchins.
I'm just curious, if I have a running hose in my house, or underneath my house, or running water in the house, you usually can hear it. Like, what's that water running? So, is this really legitimate? Did somebody inquire, like, how could you not hear that?
We were just presented the information. We did talk to the individual, and he claims that there had been some people also turning on taps in the neighborhood, some kids playing pranks, but said he did not hear it or see any pooling of water, because those are the questions we ask.
Yeah. Councillor Frayden and Friesenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, we do the adjusting for leaks, and the number 2 one here, that wasn't a leak. That was, we are responsible for what goes on in our property, and I can't see approving that one. Number 1, yes, because it does meet what the requirements of due to a leak, but somebody turning on a faucet and not hearing it, I'm sorry, I just can't abide.
Councillor Friesenham and Henderson.
I also agree with Councillor Frayden, but I also have one of the other comments. It says here that the property owner went to his insurance company, and he got paid for his repair, would the insurance company not also pay the cost for the extra water?
That's a very good question, but we were on top of that. We did not send the bill to the individual. We just had alerted him that there was a potential leak on the property, so he has not received a bill to be reimbursed by the insurance company.
So would he get reimbursed then?
If
Or
everything
could he?
goes through, yes, but we do ask for original receipts to come back, so those then they cannot be then turning those original receipts over to an insurance
So we may
company.
not have to pay it then.
Well, we have not given that bill to the individual.
I agree, the first one there, somebody turns the water on, that's not part of our bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
With that maximum adjustment amount of 3,000 per account, that means that you don't have to come to council to get. So is there any upper limit? I mean,
3,000.
Council has delegated the authority that anything under 3,000 is up to staff to investigate and approve. Anything above that comes to council. So if it's up to you if you would like to.
So people could claim $10,000 worth of
Well,
wasted water, or
that would be based on staff reading the meters. They're not going to claim something that
But the
staff
answer is-
hasn't
I
read.
realize that, but this is becoming a fairly major issue if you're getting bills like this, is it not? You know, that have to be overlooked, all that water.
Yeah, I'm
usage?
not sure this is, I can count probably a half dozen times, at least in just this 4-year term, that we've had these come back to us. Staff bring them on a, sort of quarterly basis, I think, as they come across them. But I don't think this is anything new. It's been happening for decades, as far as I know.
Okay.
When it wasn't metered, nobody ever knew about it, and then that property would keep leaking for years and years, right?
Yeah, and it will continue
Like
to
some of the
happen. I mean,
properties
it's
in the
just-
diamonds, they're not quite
Yeah.
sure where that water goes.
It will continue to happen. That's the nature.
So I just have a question. So, one leak is pretty straightforward. Story checks out. One seems a little weird, but I'm trying to imagine how someone could use $4,000 worth of water on purpose. So I just don't see that as being possible. Although it sounds like a weird story, it's almost like it couldn't. What else could it be? Than somebody turning on the tap or something, like just the same as if you got a leak worth $4,000. If somebody turns on a tap and it's for whatever reason you don't hear it in your house, it's just like a leak unless you're away, right? I'm just trying to figure out, because it does seem like an odd one, but
Somebody could have a toilet that leaks and runs continuously.
yeah,
Those
That
those
they
are
don't
very
do.
costly. Those
Right.
toilets.
okay. Just I'm trying to figure out how that makes sense. $4,000 worth of water with a leaking toilet, or a running toilet. Sorry, Councillor Patterson.
Okay, I'll let you ponder that. Well,
Deep thoughts.
if we can go back to the insurance thing, so there is potential that the one with the leak, they could get reimbursed through insurance.
Normally when you have an insurance package, you would have your bills all together, and that is what you submit to an insurance company. So out of that, you would receive the original bill from the town to say X amount was spent on water. They would have had to pay that in order to receive the reimbursement back, or at least have the insurance pay that in order to receive a reimbursement. In this case, that original bill has not gone out. All this started with us putting a note on their door saying it looks like you probably have a leak because you have very high water consumption. That's what started the whole process.
Sorry, if I can, Councillor Patterson, I think the point is, why are we waiving it if the insurance company could likely pay for it?
Could.
So should we be providing that bill to the resident through to the insurance company before we're waiving fees?
And if the
Is that
insurance company doesn't cover it, then we look at this, is what I think. Because if they've got insurance, and that's why you have insurance, they don't want to pay it, so stick it to them.
Councillor Hutchins.
So are we, is staff making this request on behalf of the owner, or is the owner actually making the request of the town?
They apply and
Reapply.
provide the information. That's what the information that we received from them, how the leak was discovered, what has been done in to repair it, and then we send out our crews to make sure it has been repaired, and that's when we do our calculations and determine if it comes back to council or not.
Councillor Arnett.
I'd like to suggest make a motion to refer this back to staff to come back with some answers to the questions, and that if we are to, in the second case, consider if there's evidence that we're not sure that maybe there is some responsibility for us, for the owner, then we limit the waiver to $3,000.
Sorry, was that a motion? To refer?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's move by a motion to refer by Councillor Arnett. Do we have a seconder?
That's a question. What is the purpose of referral? Sorry.
I don't understand.
Well, it just seems that we have so many unknowns in terms of trying to approve this with respect to what's the coverage in terms of the insurance. Is the first one legitimate, but the second one isn't? And I'm just not comfortable voting for it without having those questions answered. Is there an insurance capacity to cover versus the town? So I don't get a sense from that. We have all those questions. And then finally, it's come to us because normally it's a staff, delegated staff decision up to 3,000, if I understand correctly. And so if we're going to sort of make a decision that one's more eligible than the other one, then certainly I think we should limit it to the reimbursement to $3,000.
Well, it's a referral if someone wants to second it. Okay.
I would normally, it's just that it's creating a second part to the motion, just referring it to staff to clarify the information on the insurance paying versus the town, and options versus a hose leak versus another type of leak. But rather than determining in advance that it's going to be limited to $3,000 and there's a penalty for making a stupid mistake, which is not in the bylaw,
That's fair
yeah.
enough comment, and
So
I'll eliminate that piece then in the motion there.
So, Your Worship, it is a bit confusing to us. I mean, determining if somebody left it on purpose or not, I mean, we can't really determine that. So, unfortunately, we won't be able to give you an answer on that. If you want us to follow up with the owner who has insurance and see if the insurance can cover this cost, we can definitely ask. It will probably depend on what kind of coverage that person has. And we can probably bring that back to council if we obtain that response. But at the end of the day, this is council's
So then
decision.
we're going to analyze what insurance every person has who makes this request to the town. I just think it's we either have a policy that says that we waive things because of leaks or acts of God or vandals or whatever, or we don't. If we're going to have to go back to everybody and say, prove that your insurance won't cover this, or have you gone through insurance, and expect owners on what could be a pipe repair to then go through the process of going through insurance and stuff like that, I think kind of changes the whole essence of the policy. But if that's what council wishes to do, that's what we can do. Councillor Arnett, you made a motion, and did you second it or no? Okay.
There wasn't.
Councillor Arnett.
Well, Mayor, I think you made some good points. When it came to us, I originally thought, okay, this is the process. They're asking for a little more than what the limit is. I'm probably going to vote to approve it. But as the questions come out, you're going, oh, this is a whole different story, and I'm not sure what I should be voting on. I'm not into sleuthing out whether somebody's deserving or not. That's not the point. I just don't feel we have enough information in terms of the referral based on all of the questions I heard from other council members.
Okay. Councillor Hutchins.
Well, does our present bylaw speak to of vandalism in terms of somebody turning on a hose and letting it run for 10 days. I thought it just spoke to leaks. And I wouldn't describe a hose that's being turned on by somebody and as a leak. So I just don't know if we have the jurisdiction to actually approve this because we don't have the bylaw in front of us. So is it? Yeah. Can we refer this back? I'd like to move that we refer back to staff for clarification on the bylaw itself and insurance.
I'll call the question. All those in favor of the referral? Opposed, none opposed, motion carries. It's the curse of the long agenda. Let's beat up the little items as long as possible. So hopefully we can be expedient about this one. Maybe before I read anything out, I'll try and make a suggestion. But Council Remuneration Committee 127 through 135. So I think this is a tradition that the outgoing council may decide to reflect on remuneration. I felt that the Citizens Committee we had before did a good job. The only impact that I see coming up is the changes to the tax code for 2019, which will have an impact. The only thing I'd like to see is what that impact really looks like for councillors and mayor, for the new council and mayor, with the changes to the tax where the 1/3 is no longer considered an exemption, it's considered salary. So you'll be taxed on that. I have no appetite to call for a select committee, but if council does, I'd be willing to support it. Councillor Arnett.
Well, I just want to respond. If there was a vote, I'd be voting against it. And I just, when I saw this in the package and had a look at it, I thought back to the last election, and everybody who put their hat in the ring knew what the compensation was, and this is a service position, if you will, for to serve residents. So I'm not going to go into a long speech, but I'm going to make a couple of points. One, there was a new section added to the bylaw on compensation that was forced because I refused to take a raise in the first one. And so that's there now and allows people to decide whether they want to or not. In the next election, I will not, even if there's another raise, because I'm going to give you the reasons why. We've talked about $100,000 of costs to the taxpayer results in a 1% increase in the tax rate. So the last conversation was a 0.5%. If we go to another 0.5%, same amount for the next 4 years, we've added 1%. While we're trying to deal with a small business community that says to us, you need to reduce the costs of a tax increase on this sector. We have the large industrial sector, and we're tentative with some of the things that are happening to the forest industry. And then we reduced our return from property tax in the south end at the mall. So I don't think it's the right time to be looking at remuneration, and I don't think most taxpayers do as well. If you want to correct my pronunciation, Mayor, it doesn't take away from the issue. I'm not holier than thou, but I believe, frankly, that there's a limit, and as people start to talk about coming to serve council and mayor, and gee, there's so much work, well, don't get into it if you're not prepared for the work. Don't get into it on the sense that there's any entitlement to be compensated as if this is what your regular employment is. I don't think the taxpayer can support that. I would like to see any increases in costs go to the kind of things that we've had the courage to do in this last term and in the term before. And that is, if we need water filtration at $14 million, we're going to do it for the future. If we need to use sewage treatment, we're going to do that for the future. So I just want it really clear. I intend to run again on the basis of making sure that this will be a safe community for my grandchild with respect to how we treat marijuana legalization. I am not leaving the table unless the voters decide I should before we have the water filtration project in, and that'll be after this term. And given those are the kind of things I want to support, they're going to be highly costly. I just don't think council remuneration is high on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchins and then Patterson.
Well, I'd like to move that council appoint a select committee on council remuneration to report to council with recommendations prior to August 30th. I believe I made this motion a long time ago to September 30th, thinking that it needed to be done prior to the election process. The election process has changed. It doesn't mean there'll be any changes being forward by this committee. However, I think I think you used it very strongly last time because the previous mayor and council failed to do it last term, and you were quite upset that we didn't do it, and we had to decide on something ourselves. I think best practices would be to make that decision prior to the election and outside the election cycle. I can tell you the school trustees in Cowichan had the same, no change for 20 years. No change for 20 years. So are they out of step with their colleagues? Yes. And so they had a select committee to do the same type of stuff, and they're coming forward with some recommendations that will be considered in due course. If you're speculating that there would be an increase proposed here, I'm not. We're just asking a citizen group to take a look at it as they did before. So I'd like to move that. I think it's prudent. And
Okay, seconded by Councillor Friesenhand. I already had Councillor Patterson on the list. Councillor Friesenhand, did you wish to speak? And Councillor Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just Councillor Arnett was at ICC along with yourself and Councillor Fraden and what's his name?
Hutchins.
Hutchins.
And you were there too, Councillor Patterson.
Yes. And I would say a majority of the speakers that were down there said that municipal government is the most underpaid, and I don't like using the word paid. It's basically just hopefully covering your time. We are in 4-year terms now, which does limit the opportunity for young working people to really spend the time, especially if they have young families. And the amount of time that it takes when I had a job and was going back and forth, you spend a lot of time doing this. And if you listen to that talk show CKNW, and the Lower Mainland mayors and voted themselves a pension plan and a raise and then withdrew it, the majority of the talk from the Vaughn Palmers and the John McCaws and those people, that was done wrongly according to them. But municipal politicians, which we are underpaid for, and this is coming from these so-called experts, to open it up and hopefully get more young people involved, or even more people at all. Unfortunately, you look at other organizations around, everybody is screaming for volunteers and helpers. You have to make it partially worth their while. So I'm going to disagree with you on that. But I'm glad to hear that you're going to run again, because initially you said you weren't. Thank you.
Councillor Arnett.
Well, I've made it clear when we run. I started running on fresh potable water, and until that's done, I'll be asking for a seat at the table. With respect to the compensation, you come to this table And if you decide, let's say, to be the CVRD person as well, you get paid. You get paid in the mayor's job. There are people you know, you get paid for committee work. I just feel very, very strongly that, first of all, if this goes through, that there is not a councillor sitting on the committee, not a sitting elected official on the committee. Let the citizens decide. And in terms of picking the citizens to do that, make sure there is somebody from the business community. So there's checks and balances. There is no question that there is lots of work, and a lot of the work is self-imposed. For if you are truly interested in this work, then you do the reading and you take the time. And if you are, when I came to this table, the majority of people sitting around the table were retired, and I had a full-time job, as did you, Councillor Patterson. I've watched other people balance all of those things. Running for council is a choice. It isn't, and I certainly don't want to see it becoming a career politician's choice. I would prefer to see people sitting at the table say, yes, there's a small amount of compensation. The compensation that you get is the service to the community and the building of the long-term management and planning that needs to happen. I'll just stop there and just say this. Finally, I was astounded when I wanted to not take the raise, and there was nothing that would allow us to make that choice. And we struggled, and I went through all of the emails back and forth to staff, and we managed to do that, and you as good people supported it as well. So that allowed me or other people who want to make that choice have the choice. So it's with great respect I say this to all of you. I have high regard for all of you. It isn't about being up on a pedestal. It's about the fact that we have constantly discussions around the table about how we can cut the cost to the taxpayer, and then we vote ourselves raises. It makes no sense to me.
Thank you. Councillor Friesenhan.
Just to finish this off, the recommendation has nothing to do with any raise.
I know.
Let's pass the recommendation. If they come back, I know we're going to hear all this stuff again, so I don't want to hear it anymore.
Thank you. Just to close, yeah, I absolutely, I just said at the opening that I don't think it's about raises or about changing anything. It's about understanding how compensation affects people. And it's not about me or anybody around this table, because we all made that decision. It's about the people that continue to make the decision not to because of the impact it has on their finances. I could produce financial statements. Unfortunately, when I take breaks from my business, I don't get paid. And I've made those sacrifices knowingly and without complaint ever. So this wasn't about raises or positioning myself for the next election or anything. It was about just taking a look at it and making a reason-based approach. I appreciate all the comments, but it was so far away from what the resolution was. We should try and stay on the agenda considering how much time we have left ahead of us tonight. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Arnett opposed. Moving on.
Just a quick question. Would you like to appoint the members as we had last year? Or would you like to do, how would you handle this?
I'd like to move that staff handle it.
Yeah, staff has been moved that.
Yeah, I would suggest you give us some guidance, because if you leave it to us, what we're going to do is we're going to invite the same people. Is that okay with council?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure of the composition. I know that there was business people and single parents and things like that.
So you want us to come up with a list of recommendations?
I would say that for the next meeting. Well, there's...
No, I think we should do it.
No, because then it's going to be questioned on whether there's the right business person on there or whatever, right?
I think it's a council decision to appoint a committee.
So yeah, come back with a
otherwise we
list.
can advertise if you wish.
No.
No. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to bylaws, Town of Ladysmith Financial Plan Bylaw, pages 136 through 140. The recommendation is that council adopt the Town of Ladysmith Financial Plan Bylaw 2018 number 1956.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Friesenhan. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. 11.2, Town of Ladysmith Tax Rates, Bylaw 2018, number 1957. Does this change at all based on the error from the province? No? Okay, thank you. Pages 141 through 142. The recommendation is council adopt the Town of Ladysmith Tax Rates, Bylaw 2018, number 1957. Moved by Councillor Friesenhand, seconded by Councillor Fraden. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Water Tax Bylaw 2018, number 1958, pages 143, 144. Recommendation is that council adopt the Water Parcel Tax Bylaw 2018, number 1958. Moved by Councillor Friesenhand, seconded by Councillor Patterson. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Sewer Parcel Tax Bylaw 2018, number 1959, 145, 146. Recommendation is that council adopt the Sewer Parcel Tax Bylaw 2018, number 1959. Moved by Councillor Fraden, seconded by Councillor Patterson. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. 11.5, Town of Ladysmith Smoking Regulation Bylaw 2017, number 1936, pages 147 through 154. And the recommendations are 4 parts. Town of Ladysmith. Read Town of Ladysmith. Oh. Sorry, that it usually says that council. Oh, there it is. Read the. It's just the way it reads. It says read. Read Town of Ladysmith Smoking Regulation Bylaw 2018, number 1936. First, second, and third time refer the bylaw to the Minister of Health. Number 2, direct staff to mount appropriate no smoking signage at the entrance to parks, public spaces, and town-owned buildings. Direct staff to implement communications and public education strategy to support the introduction of Bylaw 1936. And number 4, request that the Cowichan Valley Regional District amend the CVRD Clean Indoor Air and Control of Smoking Regulation Bylaw 1995, number 1672, to remove the Town of Ladysmith. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Fraden. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Town of Ladysmith Streets and Traffic Bylaw 1998, number 1309. Amendment Bylaw number 5, 2017, number 1941, that council approve the communications plan for amendments to Streets and Traffic Bylaw 1309 regulating parking and use of boulevards, and number 2, give first 3 readings to Streets and Traffic Bylaw 1309, Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 1941. Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Friesenhand. Discussion? Councillor Fraden.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering if when the communications plan goes out from staff that they give some options to the people out there where they can be storing these vehicles and stuff like that.
Sorry? I can't. So I need, that's a question, so.
Can we do that? Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, let me think about it. Can I get back to council on this, because we will be what we could do is we can probably list what's around in the region, and they can choose. I think that's probably the wise thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. No further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor, or did anybody move and second it?
I did.
Yep. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ladysmith Officers and Delegation of Authority Bylaw 2016, number 1905, Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 1945. The recommendation is that council adopt Town of Ladysmith Officers and Delegation of Authority Bylaw 2016, number 1905, Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 1945. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Correspondence. Cindy Celeste, freighters parked in front of homes in Ladysmith, 168, 169. So I think we just need a motion
to receive.
To receive.
That was dealt with
We had already passed a resolution earlier to deal with that. So that was a motion to receive by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Friesenhand. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Number 12.2, Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals on-call service change to assist stray, sick, or injured animals. And 170 through 171, council refer the correspondence from the SPCA dated April 24, 2018 regarding emergency on-call services for assist stray, sick, or injured animals after hours for staff to review and comments. Review and recommendations, sorry. Moved by Councillor Fraden, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. And Bill Drysdale and Chuck Forrest, Ladysmith Station Revitalization Project. The council refer the correspondence from Bill Drysdale and Chuck Forrest dated May 1st, 2018 regarding Ladysmith Expo Trail Stewardship Committee's Station Revitalization Project to staff for review, consultation with Island Corridor Foundation, and recommendations with respect to liability, scheduling, and possible impact on the implementation of the waterfront area plan. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Discussion. Councillor Arnett.
Mayor, can you just clarify me with respect to the staff recommendation in terms of the impact on the waterfront plan? What is there a specific concern?
I think they just want to review the requests that are within the letter and see if they will have an impact on the waterfront plan.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you.
That is correct, yeah.
And Mr. Forrest and Mr. Drysdale are quite comfortable with that.
From what I understand, this is what in the email, if you received that was circulated, did say to work with staff on this. So it's not something that we can approve at this table without council. And the letter from the Island Corridor Foundation did seem to contemplate some discussion on how that would move forward. So in conversation, with board members as well, that they would like to look at this, what exactly will happen and see a plan. So, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. New business items, going way back to the front of the agenda because I didn't write it in the appropriate place. All right. Sports tourism and Mini World Cup.
Mayor, I know that a number of us around the table experienced the Mini World Cup that our local Mid-Island Soccer Association put on this weekend. Another outstanding event, another demonstration of the potential for sports tourism for the town, something that I think in my first term we talked about. And then we got Lot 108, and there's some apparent movement amongst various groups to move forward development of that area. Two things happened. The bakery opened for the second time ever on a Sunday. I was all over town. There were people walking that weren't from here with their kids, appreciating the amenities of our town and just the ambience. And I think that the Mayor and Council should write a letter to the organizers of Mini World Cup, Mid-Island Soccer, and other folks associated, thanking them for just, I think, was a great event in our town and gave us great exposure.
Absolutely. Moved by Councillor Arnett, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. All those in favor?
Can I just say, it was such an outstanding event, and I had a colleague say to me from Nanaimo, they, for whatever reason, they rarely come to Ladysmith except for the Festival of Lights, and they said, it was like spending the weekend on a holiday, and it was so close to home. Like it was just a fabulous feeling throughout the town, and the organization was exceptional. So.
Absolutely.
Out of town Saturday at 4 o'clock.
Thank you. Yes, and I on the scholarship committee, I sat with Jim Cram today, and we had a lot of conversations about how great it was, and that that the only thing was that when that time came to leave, it was packed and hard to get out of town for a bit. But I was going to say that's not a bad thing, though, right? So, Councillor Arnett.
Well, just one last comment. One of the highlights was that our local fire department put up their ladder truck, and they convinced one of their volunteers to go up to the top and take pictures that are posted of the Parade of Nations, and that was just such an astounding experience, and so we should use some of those photos, I think, in promoting our town.
Absolutely. So maybe we can try and get those. So we do have a resolution to set a letter of thanks and congratulations. So we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So the next one I have here is Ladysmith Ambassadors.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this is just a natural thing that we do, but I'd like to make a motion that we send a letter of congratulations and thanks to the outgoing ambassadors. You did write a very nice, lengthy speech.
Hey, if you have to give it in my absence, I might as well make it long.
And also, if we could include, send a letter to the incoming ambassadors.
Absolutely.
It was a very long night, and all those young ladies did an amazing job.
That's moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Yes, I won't make you read my speech again, but thanks for doing that for me. And yeah, I
did fumble a little bit.
That's okay. It made it more natural,
the end,
especially when you started getting teared up, right?
It wasn't pretty.
No, it was good. It's a beautiful thing. We have wonderful people in that program, and every year you forge these relationships. For me, you know, I know it's late, but I have anxiety, right? So when you have familiar faces at all the big events, and when, you know, I can't eat the day before a big speech or whatever, and when I get there and they know this about me, it's something that I share with them, to see the way that they kind of like rally around you and say, come on, it's going to be awesome. And, you know, Brandy and Nina and Sydney seem to do that in an extra special way, so I really appreciated it. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. And finally, placemakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say probably 2 months ago we had a group of young people here,
yes,
youth, and they gave a very nice presentation. Have we gotten back to them? Have we even discussed it?
So the we can follow up, but the foundational piece of that became a big part of the youth planning process. So when they just did the roll up with it, I spoke to a couple of members of that group, and they've been engaging with the youth plan. So I would expect to see that come back to council with some of the recommendations from youth plan.
But my point is acknowledging that group of young people that came here to speak. You know, did we even send a thank you to acknowledge? We're talking about young people here and getting involved in stuff, and I don't know if, you know, we, other than thanking them that night, did we?
Yeah, we can send them a letter, but yeah, there's I think Duck moved that too. If we get a seconder, a letter to the leadership group that did the placemaking series. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carried. It was seconded by Councillor Arnett. All right, question period. We have no unfinished business, I don't believe. Question period.
Bill Drysdale, 816 Malone. Thank you to council and to staff for supporting our Expo Trail Stewardship Committee. We appreciate it. My question is about bollards, but I'll just make a couple of points with regard to the water. There's a lot of folks up, at least on Malone Road end, that have poly B, and you're going to see more of these water breaks and issues with the water. Say it's on my agenda to change out my whole thing. I just repaired it, and there's other people, 3 on our street within 2 months.
Just had a friend of ours when we were away in Yellow Point got a call on poly B, and
so that's going to be an issue, ongoing issue. And just in defense of the person there that's had the running hose, maybe they're hard of hearing. I would suggest if they have the greenest lawn in the neighborhood, it might be worth putting that off. But, you know, if Nestle can buy, you know, 1 million liters of water for $2, surely we can let the dollar go by.
Yeah.
But bollards.
To the questions.
My question on bollards is: has staff and council considered working with businesses if they want to expedite installation of a bollard? Say, you know, if they put in 2K and we put in, the town put in a K to make that happen.
Just to be simple, because it's late, no.
Okay.
I think I can safely say that, but staff can take it under advisement as something that we can look at.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Rob Johnson, 526 First Avenue. First of all, I'd like to talk also about the bollards. I was very surprised to see the cost structure of $3,000 a piece. As a building owner who's been struck 3 times, and my tenant is very fearful of injuries, I take this very seriously. But I think the type of bollards that you're talking about putting in with this extra 6 feet in the ground with concrete are like designed for places where people will want to drive a vehicle high speed and smash into the places to steal stuff. If you turn around and you take a look at the accidents and the history of it, and I've investigated basically about a dozen of them, there are people coming in and they're going fairly slow. If you have the ballard as they suggest in the instructions on how to put it in, which is about a 3.5-inch block down and bolts up, the psychological effect of driving up to the ballards will slow you down immediately, and nobody wants to hit the car on it. So I would really suggest, and I ask of council, that they look at the first phases, and you can do my place as one of the first phases, by not putting the extra money in and extra depth in, and find out how successful they are. Because I can't see the point of spending $2,500 per ballard for something that may or may not be necessary.
Thank you.
The second point I have...
So, question period, right? It does say in the policy that it's not about comments, a question.
The question was, would you be willing to try it on trial basis at my place?
I would say that we've made a resolution unless council makes an alternative resolution. At this point, I can't make a commitment for that.
Would council suggest...
I can't. We're at the end of a council meeting without a resolution. I can't speak for council.
The second question I have, in your discussions in regards to the ballards, have you thought about the effect it can have on potential for movie shoots? My tenant has told me that they have been contacted, that there's supposed to be a movie shoot in September for 5 days closing off First Avenue. So my question is, what is the town's policy and procedure in notifying businesses on First Avenue that are going to be directly affected as to having some input in this? You may contact with the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Business Association, but if you look at the makeup of them, they don't have a lot of First Avenue businesses. You don't have the Bowman Meats. You don't have...
The Downtown Business Association?
On the board.
Oh, on the board.
On the board.
I thought you were talking about
and
the membership.
they're the ones that are being discussed. So, again, one of the comments was made earlier about the ballards. As a building owner who's been affected, I have not been contacted as to the proposed plan. So,
thank you. Did you have a question?
Yes, my question was, do you have a policy in regards to movie shoots?
No.
Will bring in discussions with the building owners and the landlords of the building, not necessarily the tenants.
I have answered the question.
Okay.
With movie shoots, considering this would be the third movie in over a decade combined, I think developing a policy for 3 movies within a 10-year span would probably be a waste of time.
May I suggest that a 5-day shoot is significantly different?
Oh, it could be, for sure. But that's why you look at it on an individual basis, not develop a policy around it.
And the last question I have is on the street plan proposals where you're talking about bicycle paths. Motorized scooters are not allowed on sidewalks. They are supposed to be on the roadway.
Sorry,
actually,
mobility scooters
Yep.
are not supposed to be on sidewalks?
Correct.
Okay.
We researched this years ago when I was on council. The point being, when you're doing your bicycle paths, you should be looking at, because of a number of our seniors, the need for scooter paths, and if they should be designed to be in accordance with that, because in the future I think you'll be having more scooters than bicycles.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, boy. Is it a question or is it another comment?
It's a question.
Not rolled up in a long comment?
If you don't interrupt anymore there, Mayor, respectfully.
I'm just waiting until you find the page, Bill.
In the streets and traffic bylaw amendments, I will suggest you change it from tactics, because that sounds like a war on our citizens, to methods in any reference to that. What are we going to do with the homeless folks that are living in their vehicles and stuff? You've created a bylaw now that makes that illegal. What are we going to do with those folks who live in their vans or their cars because they don't have another option?
I can't speak to that right now. I'd have to get some feedback from staff.
Because, yeah, we've basically picked on them, and somebody who's got a tent has a better shot at getting in there.
In our existing bylaw, I believe it says no overnight camping on all streets, so
it does.
it's already in the bylaw. No.
No, well, but we're trying to create a better environment for the folks that are living in the target.
Most of the changes that were made were only that any of the few changes that were actually made to the bylaw were recommended because of liability for safety for people, unhitched trailers, things like that. The rest of it is all existing in the existing bylaw.
Yeah, I'm just saying that we've created something now that I understand we don't want to create a homeless camp